Hello friends, welcome to this video. Now in the previous video we saw that how we can manipulate the pivot table. We saw the different options that we could do it in the pivot table. Now in this video I'll be focusing on the tab known as Pivot Table Analyze tab, and then in the next video we'll be seeing that what options we are having in the Pivot Table Design tab. So let us start in this video the Pivot Table Analyze tab. So in the last video we already created this pivot table where I've taken here the subcategory and the ship mode, and here I've taken the sum of sales. Now what we'll be doing, we'll be going to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. So whenever you are selecting any one cell within the pivot table, then you get here these two tabs, Pivot Table Analyze tab and Pivot Table Design tab. Suppose if you click outside this pivot table, so now you can see that this pivot table fields panel has gone, and also here we are not getting those two tabs, that is Analyze tab and Design tab. So if you want to see the two tabs over here, if you want to see the panel over here on the right hand side, then you have to select one cell within the pivot table, so it comes back. Now I will go to this Pivot Table Analyze tab and let us see that what options we have here. So first of all, it is showing us the pivot table name. So here by default it is written Pivot Table 1. If you want to rename this pivot table, you can also select these options and I can rename the option. Let's say here I go for the pivot table name as first pivot table, something like that. So I can rename this pivot table. Then I go to this another options, that is options here. If I click on options, then I get this dialog box here. Now see, in these options I can change the default settings. Whenever I'm creating the pivot table, there are some default settings over here. So if I don't like the default settings, if I want to change the default setting, then I have to click this button here, options, and then this dialog box will open up here. Here you can see the various tabs like layout and format, totals and filters. See, whenever we are creating a pivot table, we are getting these grand totals. So if you do not want to see the grand totals as a default, then you can remove this tick mark from these two options, and that is in the totals and filters. And now if you are creating a pivot table, it will never show you the grand totals. But let me keep these two things active. Then I can also go for the display. In the display also we'll talk more about this expand oblique collapse button here in this pivot table. So if I don't want to see these expand oblique collapse buttons, I can remove the tick mark and I can never see this thing. So likewise, these are these various options that we have here. So this is this options dialog box. Then here it says active field, so it is sum of sales. So here we are having the sum of sales that is showing you over here. Then we are having the field settings. If I click on the field setting, then I'm getting this dialog box. This we have already seen in the last video, that we can change the summarization things. So instead of sum, I can go for count, average, mean, max, etc. So this is the field settings. Now what is this show details? So suppose if I've selected, let's say this cell 510 where it is written. So I select this one cell, and if I click on this show details, then automatically it will create a new page or new sheet, and in the new sheet we are having here the details of that value. So if I add all this sales value, it is coming to 510, and that is the value that we see over here. So I've already told you in the last video that if you want to see the details of any of this value in the pivot table, you can double click over here, and then these details pages will be appearing one by one. And you also have here this option in the Pivot Table Analyze tab, these show details. Then here we have this expand field, collapse field that we'll be seeing when we'll be talking about the grouping. All these options are part of the grouping topic, so that I'll be taking in the separate video. Then insert slicer, insert timeline. This will also be a part of another video where I'll be talking about how to create the slicer, how to create the timeline, how to create the filter within the pivot table. Filter connections, these filter connections will also be part of one topic related to the filter. Then this refresh button. Now see, in the last video I already mentioned this point that if your main table, this table, if this main table is getting updated, then you have to come to your pivot table, and either you can select one value, right click, and you can click on refresh. This is one option, or you can also go to the Pivot Table Analyze tab. In the Pivot Table Analyze tab, you are having the refresh button, so you can go for any of this option. Then change data source. Suppose see, now the data source for this pivot table is this order sheet. Now if I want to change the data source, I don't want to connect the order sheet with this pivot table, or I want to connect another data source through this pivot table, I can click on this option, change data source, and now it will ask you that okay, which data source you want to connect with this pivot table. Now in our example we have only one sheet here, there's the order sheet, but if you are having another data set also, that also you can connect with your this pivot table. So then it will show you the data of only that main table. not the order sheet here. So this is what we mean by the chain data. So then we have here clear. Clear means it will clear this pivot table. So if I click on this clear button, clear all, so now this pivot table is gone. Now again I have to create a pivot table. So let me drag here, suppose category, I put it in the row section. Let me take here region in the column section, and then I drag here, suppose profit. I put the profit in the value section, and now my pivot table is again created. So this is what we mean by the clear option. Clear will definitely clear your whole pivot table. It will remove these values here. So that is what we mean by the clear. Then select. Okay, so suppose if I click on this select option, I can select this entire pivot table. If I want to do it, I can click on entire pivot table. So this whole pivot table is selected, and then with this move pivot table, I can also move it to another location within the workbook. So I can move this pivot table from this first pivot table sheet to another sheet. So that is also possible here. Yeah, so for that purpose you can go for select, and then you can click on the move pivot table. Then in one of the video I'll be talking about these two concepts, which is known as, or I would say three concepts, that is fields. It is also known as calculated field, calculated items, and then we'll be also talking about the sets. So this will be a separate video on this button. Then OLAP tools. Normally we don't work with these OLAP tools, but if you are having this kind of situation, you can click on this OLAP tools button. Then relationship button. Now in the relationship button, what happened that suppose if I'm having 2-3 tables and I want to connect those 2-3 tables with each other, then I can create the relationship between the tables. So I can click on this button here. Now unfortunately we have only one table, so I cannot create the relationship, but yeah, you can create the relationship among the various tables. Then we have here this last three options, that is field list, plus or minus buttons, and field headers. So field list means this one. Sometimes by mistake you click on this close option and now your panel is gone, so you panic. But you should not worry. If your pivot table fields panel is gone, you can come to this pivot table analyze tab and you have to click this button field list, and now it is back. So remember this button field list. Then we have here the plus or minus buttons. Now what is this plus or minus buttons? See, just now here I am having the category in the rows section. Now what I'll do, I will bring here the subcategory and I'll put it here in the rows section. So below the category I'm having the subcategory. So now there are two fields in the rows section. So here we can see the one kind of a hierarchy. So we are having the furniture category. Within the furniture category we are having these 4 subcategories. Then we have office supplies category, and within the office supplies category we are having the 9 subcategory, and so on. Here I have created one kind of hierarchy, and now you can see that there is a minus sign over here. If I click on this minus sign, then I can see here this furniture category is now collapsed. Likewise office supplies, technology. So these are those plus and minus. When you collapse, you will see the plus sign. When you click on the plus sign here, it will get expanded. So now it is getting expanded. This is what we mean by the plus and minus. So if I don't want to see this plus and minus, I can click on this button here, plus or minus. So now it will not show me the plus or minus. But actually I would suggest you to keep this plus or minus button on. And finally we are having the field headers here. If I click on the field headers, you see that these are my field headers. Something was written over here, row labels, and here it was written column labels. If I do not want to see this thing, these two things, I can click on the field headers and it will not show me. If I click again this field headers, those two labels have come back. Here we have seen in this video that what are the various options that we have in the pivot table analyze tab. Now in the next video we'll be focusing on the another tab which we are having in the pivot table, that is known as pivot table design tab. So see you in the next video. Thank you very much.